Welcome to Physicians Who Lead, the podcast where we sit down with physician leaders who are shaping the future of healthcare. Each episode, we dive into the real challenges facing our system today and hear directly from the physicians leading the way with innovation, resilience, and vision. If you want to understand how healthcare is changing and meet the leaders driving that change, you're in the right place.
Good morning. It's morning where we're recording today, so I'm going to start with a good morning. My guest today is Dr. Nikki Binz on the Physicians Who Lead podcast. We're going to talk about her experience in medical education as well as leadership and have a good time, and I'll try and be a professional. So, Dr. Binz, can you tell us a bit about how you got to where you are and kind of what you're doing and give us the elevator pitch of who you are?
Sure. Great. Good morning, Kevin, and thanks for the invite today. I had an odd journey into academic medicine. I knew I wanted to be a doctor for a lot of my life. My dad was a physician and had a big impact on me growing up and seeing him help others. So I knew I was going to go to medical school. And in medical school, I decided on emergency medicine and really liked taking care of the patients. It's the main reason why most doctors go to medical school, is to go out and take care of patients. And went into residency, and towards the end of my residency, still had that plan to go out and do community medicine and just do the heart of what it is to be an emergency physician. And I was given a lot of opportunities to start to interact with learners, particularly medical students at that stage in my career, and found it really rewarding to see learners have their aha moments, discover what their passions are. And so I put my foot mildly in the door into academics and really enjoyed that process of taking medical students through the journey to becoming full-fledged emergency physicians. So I was very lucky to have mentors who kind of pointed it out to say, hey, Nikki, you seem to enjoy this. You seem to be good at it. Why don't you keep your foot in the door here, where I trained at UNC, and see what it's like? And so sure enough, within about a year of being a community physician and really loving taking care of patients, but feeling like something else was missing from my career, and landed back at UNC as an assistant residency program director and started working heavily in graduate medical education and training physicians to become emergency physicians. And I was really lucky to, very early in my career, get further leadership roles in graduate medical education, and then became the program director of our residency program, which I did for 10 years. And along the way, picked up some other fun education roles, including the Associate Designated Institutional Officer, which is a horrible title to describe what it actually does. But I work at the top of the GME office at UNC to help oversee all of our trainees, which happens to be 1,000 trainees, both residents and fellows, in all of the specialties. And have been lucky with, again, great mentors in my department and in the hospital, with just good timing and opportunities to get more heavily involved in graduate medical education.
Was there like an aha moment for you when you thought that leadership was something that you wanted to look at?
Great question. I don't know if there was a specific moment. I think that I tended to gravitate towards those positions kind of my whole life. You know, I like to work with others. I am a very extroverted, social person, so really like working in teams, and tend to be someone who, likes to step up to the plate and organize a team. I really enjoy helping others achieve their goals and their passions, and helping cultivate their strengths, bring them in to different projects. So I just kind of always gravitated towards that as a kid. I, was the captain of this or the president of this club, and just kind of was always a part of my being. I think the bigger aha moment for my career was, again, when I was a third-year resident and working with residents. Previously, one of the reasons why I never considered academics was because, I don't know, I never considered myself, I wasn't like the valedictorian of my med school, right? I wasn't like the smartest person, book smart, that seemed to equate with what academia is, right? You're the expert of these things. And that totally, created imposter syndrome in me. And so was able to kind of bend it and see how I work really well with learners. I'm able to understand where they are, help them get to where they need to be. I think that was the bigger aha moment. Like, okay, I don't have to be the smartest emergency physician to be a leader in emergency medicine. I can contribute in lots of other ways that are sometimes harder, I think, for physicians, and have some of the soft skills to work with others and help them achieve their goals.
Excellent. Excellent. And it's as you moved from more of a clinical focused role to a leadership role, what were the biggest transitions that you found? Like what things did you have to learn and maybe change your perspective?
Yeah. I think that balance is always hard. Many of us go into emergency medicine because we like the idea of either being at work and on or away from work and doing whatever we want to do. And becoming a leader, that kind of blurs away because you are always wearing your leadership hat, even when you're off of your shifts. And so figuring out the balance of meeting your clinical responsibilities and working your shifts and still kind of being on call, especially as program director. I was on call pretty much every day of every year for my trainees. If there was an emergency in their lives, if there was an issue in the emergency department, I was kind of the go-to for them to call if they were in distress or had concerns. And that was definitely a shift in trying to figure out how to balance that with being a mom and having twins who are now 11 and having this career that is dual clinician and educator slash leader. I think was really tough. I think the other piece, especially as I grew in my career and became a little more senior, it is hard to have that perfect balance with my trainees, right? I I care about them. I try to, not be the leader who's on the top of the podium and, just this kind of foreign boss person, right? I really try to have a connection with them, and having that connection where you can kind of still be a mentor and an advisor, maybe not quite a friend, but closer to there, but all of a sudden being thrown to be a boss. And so particularly when I went from associate program director to program director, where you are the boss, it really shifted that. Whereas previously I had a really close relationship with the residents. I think they came to me with a lot of concerns. When you're the boss, it's a little bit different. They're a little bit, more scared of you, which isn't necessarily a bad thing all the time because you do have to be their boss and get them to where they need to be to graduate. But I think it's hard to walk that balance of being a teacher, being a coach who really cares about their maturation and growth, and also being the boss who has to hold them accountable, identify where their areas of improvement are, and support them through some of their challenges and struggles.
Is part of your role curriculum development?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if you can talk about kind of how you would change curriculum and kind of what the impacts and stuff like that were on the learners and their residents and fellows and such.
Yeah. So, in my personal experience, the biggest shift was definitely related to COVID. We saw so many things change in medicine when COVID decided to show up at our front doorstep. And we had to really rethink how we were doing things in the emergency department and as a part of the residency program, because we all of a sudden had to care and think a lot more about our physicians and our residents and keeping them safe, in addition to providing excellent care, keeping our patients safe, and still had to educate them. We couldn't just pause all of our didactics, right? We had to figure out how to transform what we did in person into more of this virtual world that we all had to deal with. And it was quite a struggle because we are required to provide 5 hours of didactics to residents every single week. And our tradition had been that we did that in person. Again, many of us are social beings, so we
Yeah.
enjoy being with each other. You have more effective discussions. And we had, kind of were set in our ways with how we did simulation, with how we did lectures and small groups. And we had to go back to the drawing board because we couldn't put all of us in the same room, because if one person was sick and infected everyone else, we would not have any more physicians to provide care in the emergency department. And yet we still had to meet their educational needs and provide them education about emergency medicine and procedures and all the things that we have to do in 3 years. And especially since, the COVID impact went for a long time, again, we couldn't just pause and restart a month later. So we
Right.
had to adapt to using virtual platforms like everybody else did, but in an educational way, which is really tough because none of us had our own education around that beforehand. So we were learning on the fly how to deliver quality education in a virtual platform, how to still consider doing simulation virtually. Um,
Right.
And there weren't very many products then, right? Now, kind of after the fact, there are more things coming online, recognizing that this is a thing. But we came up with as many creative ways as we could to still deliver high quality education in a different format. And then as soon as it was safe enough, we went back to in person because it definitely wasn't quite the same and weren't always able to replicate what we thought our residents really valued in their education. I think has an upcoming huge shift, likely, that many of us are going to have to deal with. Currently, emergency medicine residency programs are required to be 3 years, and that is currently under review and very likely to move to a new 4-year requirement. And so that is something that all residency programs are going to have to step back and come up with new curriculums with the guidance of the ACGME, who creates our requirements, but figuring out how to do that each of our shops. And so I know in my program, we're already discussing how we might meet what some of those new requirements might look like and really change what current residency training looks like to the future.
Now, is that across the U.S. or is it just within North Carolina?
That's across the U.S. So the ACGME is our governing body for residency programs and tells us what our minimum requirements and expectations are for each specialty. And that is a decision at their level. So any ACGME accredited emergency medicine residency program might be changing over the next couple of years.
Interesting. That's going to make my job challenging for a year because we'll lose an entire cohort. So
correct.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure that's going to be even better for rural communities that struggle getting emerge physicians now, right?
Yeah, it's definitely going to pose a lot of challenges, and there's some ups, there's some downs. It's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah. So let's talk about the, you opened the door a little bit with COVID and stuff like that, but have you been implementing digital tools in education in addition to just responding to COVID?
Yeah, we're definitely trying to meet our learners where they are. And that is one thing that they crave, that they're good at, that they're used to. And there's lots of great products that are coming out there. I think we use a lot of different platforms for board prep, for example. Our residents really enjoy practicing questions, and our educational theories prove to us that, the more that they practice and space repetition really is what ingrains the knowledge that they need to become board certified, pass their exams, and obviously have increased knowledge for direct patient care. So instead of, me having to create questions and deliver those, there's a lot of products out there that residents enjoy that can force feed them questions and poke them and remind them to use those. And so finding the right fit for each learner has their own preferred way of learning, right? Their time of day, how they want their education delivered. Question banks are one big thing. We do use simulation. We use high fidelity sim. We have sim centers at both of our hospitals that the residents use, and we do at least 2 to 3 hours of high fidelity sim every single month. A great way to work on what we call halo procedures, the procedures that are high risk, but don't happen as often. So you don't get as much practice, but you have to, again, have that repetition so that in the event you need to go do a crike on a patient, you haven't done it on a person in a very, very long time. You've at least rehearsed it. We also use it for working on, team dynamics and physician leadership in resuscitation, for example, in the emergency department, having them work on closed loop communication. We've done joint interdisciplinary educational sim sessions with, our trauma colleagues, for example, because we work with them very regularly in the trauma room to make sure everyone knows their part, that there is a leader who can control the room. Everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing, how to communicate to make sure it's effective and is going to be good, making sure that everyone has a chance to, voice an opinion. And so SIM is a great place to work on that. We've also started to try to use simulation more for remediation as well. Trainees are all on a different journey, right? They are not learning at this perfectly straight line of I come in as an intern and I graduate, right? Everyone learns on different curves and has different plateaus, and they have different backgrounds and strengths. So SIM can be a great thing for some different areas of remediation for residents. Sometimes it might be related to communication. So we can have specific cases that are geared towards better communication with consultants, with your nurses, or maybe it's more procedural and we can go in and practice doing central lines on a mannequin and a model one-on-one with a teacher in a more low stakes environment when you're in simulation.
Nice.
And it'll give them a chance to make mistakes and then debrief and talk about in a safe setting outside of the emergency department.
It's awesome. I actually had a podcast guest about 6 weeks ago, maybe, that Canadian emerged physician, and he actually has a simulation company, and they put on mostly directly related to resuscitation, but they go from hospital to hospital to provide that training. And a lot of it, like you said, is that closed loop communication and the interdisciplinary stuff, because unfortunately not every hospital has a simulation lab or anything like that.
Mhm.
So they've created a way to do it, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of it's kind of neat from that standpoint, right? So
Yeah, it's really cool, especially with the AI stuff coming out. I mean, there are ways to make, patient encounters, and there's a lot of cool stuff that's coming out there that I think will really help a lot of programs, especially like you said, if you don't have as many resources. I'm very lucky to be at a big academic center that has a lot of things at my fingertips, but not every single program has all of those resources in one places. So in one place, so you can access some of these things just from home on your computer, which I think will be a really big advancement for education over, the next 20 years, which has already started. But the residents also enjoy those things, right? They all grew up on their phones and video games, and that's just very much used to their daily life and how they learn. One of the complaints of a lot of faculty that I hear when talking about trainees, especially if there's like a gap in knowledge or something, it's like, well, you just got to open the book and read the book. And it's like, well, that's not what they're doing these days. Like, there are other ways for them to learn. Like, yes, we still always encourage reading books. That's good for us. And that's where a lot of the knowledge exists, but it's not really the preferred delivery of our trainees anymore. And
yeah.
us as educators have to kind of adapt and come up with different ways and not just keep saying more books, but finding some of these other entities. And our residents love listening to podcasts like this, that many of them drive, and it's an easy way to multitask, which is what every ER doctor loves to do. We can't just do one thing at one time. They're really good at finding some of these resources and often bring it to us too.
Yeah, that's awesome. We so my oldest daughter is 19 and she's in first year university studying social work. It's very interesting because I'm 51, and I remember the Dewey Decimal System in libraries and things of that nature. She will download her books into a PDF and read it on her phone. And
Mhm.
she takes an iPad to school, so she does stuff on her iPad and not on a laptop. She bought books, and then once she found she could buy the digital copy, she's got all these books that she's not opening. Whereas I like the physical feel of a book and even the smell of the pages and stuff like that, right? So it's just an interesting kind of different dynamic. But I do think obviously it's easier to carry your phone in your pocket than a bunch of textbooks
Mhm.
from that standpoint, right? So
Yeah.
now, how do you encourage other people to get into leadership roles? And how do you encourage people to continue? So two parts, sorry. How do you encourage people to get into leadership? But also, how do you encourage physicians to continually learn and continually develop their skills?
Yeah, great question. I think we really make it a part of our culture. And so, for example, in my trainees, I really try to preach to them that they need to find ways to be engaged as an emergency physician outside of their shift work. I think it's one of the best ways to protect against burnout, because shift work is just inevitably going to kind of wear you down over time. Working nights, working weekends, there's always more patients in the waiting room, right? Your job's never done. And so finding a way to be involved in something as a physician outside of your clinical work, I think is really valuable. And leadership is one of those easy ways to do it in so many different arenas, right? And so we really push our residents to find something that they're passionate about and take on leadership roles in that. And so in our 3-year program, all third-year residents have a leadership title of some sort in our department. And so we have a couple of chief residents, which is pretty common for training programs. And then we also have directors of other committees involved in our hospital or in our department. And so we'll have a director of medical student education, for example. And that's what I served as a resident, and one of the biggest things that got me kind of to where I am in my career. And so hopefully these are springboards for residents to get involved early, start to interface with more leaders in our department and in our institution, and just get involved. Because a lot of it just, it takes someone just to pull you in to a meeting to get that first foot in the door, and see what the opportunities are. We've had residents who have been, directors related to EMRs. Like when we first deployed our EMR at UNC, we had a resident who had an IT background, which was great. So he was like the director and the super user who helped our department create interfaces there. So trying to take their special talents and interests with other things that our department needs, our hospital needs, or is involved in, and bringing those together and giving them a seat at the table to get experience, and to observe other leaders. That's kind of the first thing that we really do for our trainees. And then as far as with my faculty, I really try to just invite them to more meetings, right? That's one easy way to get people more involved, which is not always the most fun way, but bringing them on board to projects that I luckily am involved in or have connections to, because I have been at my institution for a long time. I know a lot of people and can be aware of what my team, each individual wants, goals and passions are, and try to look out for opportunities for them. That they're not always going to raise their own hand and say like, oh yeah, I'm ready for this, but challenge them. I just had one of my faculty members who is heavily involved in operations and efficiency and patient safety. And there was a position that came open at our institution, and I was like, you're going to apply for this. And she's like, I'm too junior. I haven't been here long enough. And I'm like, no, like just apply. So sometimes they just need a sponsor to say, hey, like you're ready for this, and at least give it a chance. And it's okay to fail, right? Which many of us in medicine are really afraid to do. So we don't always stick our neck out there for some of these positions. But I try with my team to really understand each of them as an individual and figure out what makes them tick, whether that's a trainee or a faculty, and try to align their projects, their potential leadership roles related to what they're passionate about. Because my line that I like to use is you got to figure out how to fill your own cup,
Right.
because that shift work sometimes is going to completely drain that cup because it's hard, it's exhausting. We deal with sad, terrible things sometimes. Sometimes people are in bad moods and not nice to us, right? And so you have to be intentional about filling your cup with things you love. Finding that out for my colleagues or my trainees is one of my key goals in my
Right.
leadership positions.
Well, and it's interesting because I think depending on the structure. So I do work in Canada and the U.S., so I see different structures, and sometimes a gap between the administration and the physicians and different aspects. And I think one of the key takeaways from this conversation is the notion of continual development and the notion of continual engagement by communicating those things. And I think that's key, that you need to include physicians in decisions, and physicians can lead from a clinical standing as well as from a leadership position by being involved in those projects. You mentioned the IT aspect for the EMRs and stuff like that. Like physicians come with a lot of skills. And I think that, if we can start elevating the involvement to at the start of the project and not at a later stage, then we have contribution from physicians that they want to give, but maybe we're not getting because of the communication gaps and stuff like that, right? So
For sure.
it's
We need to be more proactive about getting a seat at the table too. It needs to be from both sides, right? Like,
mhm.
yeah, hopefully leadership are pulling us up, and hopefully we're putting ourselves at the table. Because yeah, sometimes ideas seem great on paper, but when you really bring it to the people who are the ones who are going to implement it, they'll figure out the holes or the
Yeah,
snafus of like,
yeah,
that's not really going to work because this is not our flow. And you have to go to the source. And I think yes, hospital leadership and physicians themselves both need to be more proactive about
yeah.
being at those important tables.
Well, listen, I appreciate taking the time to talk to me this morning. It's been a lot of fun. I think it's been great because you're the first person I've had from an academic environment. So it's interesting. And I think that technology is going to impact how we train. So it'll be interesting to see what the next 5 years brings. So I'll continue to pester you over the next 5 years to learn what's going on and keep myself up to date.
Sounds good.
All
Thank you
right.
very
Well, listen,
much.
all the best. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.